12 years. No handshakes, no lovers, no mercy. Seo Hyun-woo could survive a bullet without flinching, but a single brush of skin would shatter him from the inside out, until a black maid broke every rule during a blackout, placed her bare hand on his chest, and gave him the first silence he'd felt in over a decade. Once upon a time, in the shadow-drenched mountains of upstate New York, there stood a fortress of glass and steel that the underworld whispered about but never approached. Inside that fortress lived a man everyone feared, respected, and refused to name out loud. His name was Seo Hyun-woo. People called him the Shadow King, the untouchable emperor of the Jangmi Syndicate, because for 12 years, no one, not family, not allies, not the women who threw themselves at his feet, had been able to touch him. Not a handshake, not a brush of fingers, not even the graze of fabric against his skin without consequence. But few people knew why he lived like that. They only knew the surface. A ruthless mafia boss who executed men for standing too close. A billionaire who wore custom-lined gloves even in summer. A ghost in a glass house. But the truth was so much darker. Hyun-woo was not born broken. He was not born cold. He was born sharp and clever, with a laugh that made his father proud and a heart that hadn't yet learned to distrust. When he was younger, he loved running through his family's estate in Seoul. He loved the weight of his father's hand on his shoulder. He loved believing that loyalty and blood meant something. But everything shattered the year his half-brother Jin-soo came home from military school. Jin-soo was older, colder, hungry in a way that made the air around him taste like metal. He smiled with too many teeth and watched Hyun-woo the way a wolf watches a wounded deer. Their father had always said the syndicate would go to the son who proved himself worthy. Jin-soo decided worthiness was something you could steal. It started small. Whispers in their father's ear, lies about Hyun-woo's judgment, forged documents suggesting betrayal. But Hyun-woo was loved, protected, so Jin-soo did what predators do when they can't break their prey from the outside. He broke him from within. There was a woman. Her name was Mireille. She had honeyed words and doe eyes, and Hyun-woo, young and foolish, believed her when she said she loved him. He didn't know Jin-soo had sent her. He didn't know every kiss was surveillance. Every whispered secret, a weapon handed to his enemy. The night it happened, Hyun-woo was 23 years old. Mireille lured him to a warehouse on the edge of the city. She said she had something to show him, something that would prove his father's enemies were moving against him. Hyun-woo went because he trusted her, because he was still a man who believed in love. The lights were waiting, white, blinding, surgical. Jin-soo was waiting too. They strapped Hyun-woo to a metal chair in the center of a white room. Jin-soo stood in the doorway, backlit like a demon, and smiled. "You were always father's favorite. Let's see if he still loves you when you're too broken to lead." What came next wasn't torture for information. It was torture for transformation. Electroshock therapy. Over and over. Designed not to kill, but to rewire. Jin-soo had hired a rogue neuroscientist, someone who understood pain, empathy, and the fragile wiring of the human nervous system. They didn't just hurt Hyun-woo. They reprogrammed him. They turned his mirror neurons, his ability to feel empathy, into a weapon against himself. By the time they were done, Hyun-woo's brain could no longer distinguish between his pain and someone else's. Every touch from another human being transmitted their physical agony, their emotional rot, directly into his body. A handshake felt like broken glass under his skin. A hug felt like drowning. They called it tactile mirror pain synesthesia. Hyun-woo called it hell. Jin-soo left him there. Left him screaming in a white room with burns on his wrists and a nervous system that would never forgive him for surviving. Mireille never came back. She'd already been paid. By the time Hyun-woo's father found him 3 days later, the damage was permanent. Irreversible. Hyun-woo could barely stand to be in the same room as another person. His father wept. Jin-soo played the concerned brother. And Hyun-woo learned what it meant to be truly alone. He didn't break, though. He evolved. Over the next decade, Hyun-woo became something else entirely. He took his father's empire and expanded it into the shadows of America. He built a syndicate that operated through proxies, through technology, through fear. He never touched his enemies. He never had to. His reputation did the killing for him. He moved into a fortress in the mountains, a cold, modernist mansion of glass walls and steel beams that reflected nothing but isolation. He wore gloves lined with medical-grade fabric. He kept a 3-foot perimeter around himself at all times. His staff knew the rules. Never look him in the eye. Never enter a room he occupies. And God help you, never, ever touch him. People called him a monster. He let them. It was easier than explaining that he was just a man whose body had become a prison. But money couldn't buy him peace. Power couldn't silence the noise in his head. Every day was a battle against the phantom pain of proximity. Every night, he sat alone in his glass tower and wondered if this was all his life would ever be. Until far away from Hyun-woo's world of glass and silence, there lived a woman named Vanessa Williams. She didn't grow up in mansions. She grew up in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx, where the radiator only worked half the winter and the neighbors' arguments bled through the walls. She learned early that life didn't owe you fairness. It only gave you choices. Vanessa's father disappeared when she was 8. Her mother worked 2 jobs and still couldn't keep the lights on. By the time Vanessa turned 14, she was the one working, cleaning offices after school, babysitting on weekends, selling whatever she could to keep her younger brother fed. But Vanessa wasn't bitter. She was steady, calm. She moved through the world like water, quiet, persistent, impossible to break. People always said there was something peaceful about her, like she carried her own gravity. When her brother Marcus was hit by a car at 17 and lost the use of his legs, Vanessa made a promise. She would take care of him, no matter what it cost. So when the hospital bills piled up and her mother's health started failing, Vanessa did what she always did. She found a way. She saw a job listing for a live-in estate attendant at a private residence upstate. The pay was astronomical. The requirements were strange. But the listing was clear. Discretion required. No previous experience necessary. Must be comfortable working in isolation. Everyone told her not to apply. They said the man who owned that estate was dangerous. A recluse. A killer, maybe. But Vanessa had been around dangerous men her whole life. She knew how to make herself invisible. She needed the money. So she applied. The day Vanessa entered the glass fortress, her breath caught in her throat. The mansion was a masterpiece of cold beauty. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking snow-dusted pines. Furniture that looked like it had been carved from marble and shadow. Everything was pristine, untouched, like a museum where nothing was allowed to live. The house manager, a stern woman named Mrs. Choi, gave her the rules immediately. You are here to clean, to maintain, to be invisible. Mr. Seo does not tolerate mistakes. Mrs. Choi's eyes were hard. You will never touch him. You will never approach him without being summoned. If he enters a room, you leave. If he speaks, you answer briefly and respectfully. Do you understand? Vanessa nodded. She was used to rules. Her whole life had been rules. And one more thing. Mrs. Choi leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. If you value your life, you will never, ever make physical contact with him. The last person who did. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Vanessa felt a chill crawl up her spine. But she didn't flinch. She just nodded again. Then he walked in. Seo Hyun-woo entered the room like a shadow given human form. Tall, impossibly still. His face was the kind of beautiful that felt dangerous. Sharp jaw, dark eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone. Black hair swept back with surgical precision. He wore all black, gloves, a tailored suit that fit like armor. Vanessa immediately stepped back, lowering her gaze the way Mrs. Choi had instructed. But she felt him looking at her, studying her. The air between them seemed to hum with something she couldn't name. Is she the new hire? Hyun-woo's voice was low, controlled, like he was used to every word carrying weight. Yes, Mr. Seo, Mrs. Choi replied. Silence. Vanessa didn't dare look up. She focused on the floor, on her breathing, on staying as still as possible. Then Hyun-woo did something no one expected. He took a step closer. Mrs. Choi tensed. Vanessa's heart hammered in her chest. Hyun-woo stared at her for a long, unbearable moment. And then, for the first time in weeks, he felt something strange. The noise in his head quieted. Just a little, just enough to notice. He frowned, studied her face, her posture, the way she didn't tremble even though she should have. Keep her, he said finally. Mrs. Choi blinked in surprise. Sir? I said keep her. Hyun-woo's eyes never left Vanessa. She stays. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Vanessa standing in the center of the cold glass room, her heart pounding, her mind spinning. She had no idea she'd just become the only person in 12 years who made Seo Hyun-woo feel something other than pain. She had no idea her life had just changed forever. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little dark romance family stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. So find your quiet place, dim the lights, and get ready. Let's begin. The first week, Vanessa learned to move like a ghost. She woke before dawn when the sky was still bruised purple and frost clung to the windows like lace. She cleaned in silence, her footsteps swallowed by Persian rugs, laid out like pieces of history, their patterns rich and endless. She learned which rooms Hyun-woo occupied and which he avoided. She learned the rhythm of his isolation, hours in his office behind a locked door, meals eaten alone, that strange nightly vigil at the eastern window. She never spoke to him, he never spoke to her. But she felt him watching, always watching, like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't know how to name. The other staff kept their distance from her too. The cook, the groundskeeper, the night security guard, they all treated her like she was contagious. Like proximity to Hyun-woo's attention was a disease. But Vanessa didn't mind the silence. She'd spent her whole life being invisible. On the 8th day, something shifted. Vanessa was dusting the library. A cavernous room lined floor to ceiling with books in languages she couldn't read, leather spines gleaming like jewels. When she heard the door open behind her, she froze. According to the schedule Mrs. Choi had given her, Hyun-woo wasn't supposed to be in this wing until after 2. It was barely noon. She didn't turn around, didn't move, just held her breath and waited for him to leave. But he didn't leave. She heard his footsteps. Slow, deliberate, the kind of walk that belonged to a man who'd never had to hurry for anything in his life. He stopped somewhere near the center of the room. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her back like a physical thing, pressing between her shoulder blades. Minutes passed. Or maybe it was only seconds. Time felt strange in his presence, stretched thin and fragile. Finally, his voice cut through the silence, low, controlled. "You don't flinch." Vanessa's hand tightened around the dusting cloth. She kept her eyes on the bookshelf in front of her, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Sir?" The others flinch when I enter a room. There was no anger in his tone, only observation. Clinical. Detached. "You don't." She didn't know how to respond to that, didn't know if it was a criticism or a compliment or something else entirely, so she said nothing. Another pause. Then quieter, almost to himself. "Interesting." The door closed. He was gone. Vanessa exhaled slowly, her hands trembling. She pressed her palm flat against the bookshelf to steady herself, feeling the cool leather spines beneath her fingertips. She didn't understand what had just happened, didn't understand why he'd stayed, why he'd spoken to her at all, but something in the air had changed. She could feel it, thick and electric, like pressure before a storm. That night, she lay awake in the small room Mrs. Choi had given her on the 3rd floor, a space barely big enough for a bed and a dresser, but clean and warm and hers. She stared at the ceiling and thought about the way Hyun-woo had looked at her, not with lust or curiosity or even suspicion, but with something else, something that felt like recognition, like he'd seen something in her that he hadn't expected to find. She didn't know if that was a good thing or a dangerous one. The days that followed were strange. Hyun-woo didn't seek her out, but he stopped avoiding her. She would enter a room to clean and find him already there, reading or working on his laptop, and he wouldn't leave. He would just glance at her once, nod slightly, and continue whatever he'd been doing, as if her presence didn't bother him, as if, somehow, it steadied him. Vanessa learned to move around him carefully, keeping the prescribed 3-foot distance, never speaking unless spoken to. But she couldn't help noticing the small things, the way his jaw tightened when he heard footsteps approaching in the hallway, the way his breathing slowed when she was in the room, like her quietness gave him permission to breathe easier, the way he removed his gloves when he thought she wasn't looking, flexing his fingers like they ached. She noticed the gloves most of all. They were always black, always perfectly fitted, always present. Even when he ate, he wore them. One afternoon, while she was polishing the glass table in the drawing room, she found a pair discarded on the arm of the sofa. She picked them up carefully, examining the fabric, medical-grade compression material, lined with something soft and insulated. Those were custom-made in Seoul. Vanessa jumped, nearly dropping them. She turned to find Hyun-woo standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Her pulse spiked. She immediately set the gloves back down, bowing her head. I'm sorry, sir. It's fine. He crossed the room slowly, stopping exactly 3 feet away from her, close enough that she could see the dark circles under his eyes, the sharp lines of exhaustion carved into his face. You were curious. She didn't deny it. There was no point. I didn't mean to intrude. You haven't. He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers like he was looking for something specific. Then, quietly, do you know why I wear them? Vanessa hesitated. Mrs. Choi had told her never to ask questions, never to pry. But he was the one offering, and something in his voice made her think he wanted to be asked, needed to be asked. No, sir. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Because touch is poison to me. Every person carries their pain, their corruption, their sickness. And when I touch them, I feel it. All of it. Like knives under my skin. He paused, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Old trauma, carefully controlled. It's called tactile mirror pain synesthesia. When I make skin contact with another person, my nervous system mirrors what they're feeling and amplifies it into physical pain. Their guilt feels like acid. Their anger feels like burning. Their sadness feels like drowning. The words were spoken so calmly, so matter-of-factly, that it took Vanessa a moment to process them. When she did, her breath caught. That sounds like hell. It is. He picked up the gloves, turning them over in his hands. It's been 12 years since I felt another person's skin without wanting to scream. 12 years since I could shake someone's hand or embrace someone or... He trailed off, his jaw tightening. There are worse prisons than cells, Miss Williams. Vanessa's chest tightened. She thought about her brother, about the way Marcus used to hug her so tight she could barely breathe, back before the accident. She thought about what it would be like to lose that. To have every touch turned into a weapon. I'm sorry, she whispered. And she meant it. Hyunwoo's gaze snapped to hers. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or disbelief, as if no one had ever said those words to him before. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar mask of cold control. Don't pity me, he said quietly. Pity is just another kind of poison. He left the room before she could respond, his gloves still clutched in his hand. That night, the storm came. Vanessa stood at her window, watching the sky turn that strange, sickly green that always preceded the worst weather. She'd loved storms once. Growing up in the Bronx, she used to sit by the window during summer thunderstorms and watch the rain turn the streets into rivers, the lightning illuminating the city in sharp, electric bursts. But she had a feeling this storm would be different. In the staff wing's small kitchen, she overheard the cook talking to the groundskeeper in rapid Korean. She didn't understand the words, but she caught one name, Jinsu. Mrs. Choi appeared in the doorway, her face tight. Mr. Seo's half-brother is visiting at the end of the month. When he's here, you stay out of sight. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. I mean it. Miss Williams. Jinsu is. Mrs. Choi hesitated, choosing her words carefully. He's dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with violence. Stay invisible. The warning settled in Vanessa's stomach like ice. The storm hit just after midnight with the fury of something alive and angry. Vanessa was in her room, lying in bed with her eyes open, listening to the wind howl against the glass like it wanted to tear the building apart. The first crack of thunder was so loud it rattled the windows in their frames. She sat up, her heart pounding. Outside, the sky had turned that bruised, ugly green, and the trees bent nearly horizontal under the force of the wind. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Vanessa reached for her phone, using the dim glow to navigate to the door. The hallway was pitch black, the emergency lights apparently on the same failed circuit. She could hear the storm raging outside, the sound of something, branches, debris, slamming against the side of the house with enough force to crack stone. She should stay in her room. That was the smart thing to do. Wait for the generators to kick in. Wait for morning. But then she heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. A low, guttural noise that might have been a groan or a gasp or something worse. It was coming from the second floor. Vanessa didn't think. She just moved. Her phone's flashlight beam cut through the darkness as she hurried down the stairs, her bare feet silent on the cold marble. The sound came again, louder this time, more desperate, and she followed it to the east wing hallway. That's where she found him. Hyunwoo was on the floor, his back against the wall, his body convulsing like he was being electrocuted. His gloves were off, lying a few feet away, and his bare hands were clawing at the carpet, at his chest, at his own face. His eyes were open but unseeing. His mouth twisted in a silent scream. Blood trickled from his nose. His skin had gone gray. Vanessa dropped to her knees beside him, her phone clattering to the floor. "Mr. Co." He didn't respond, didn't even seem to hear her. His whole body was locked in spasm, every muscle rigid, his breathing coming in short, shallow gasps that sounded like he was drowning. She'd seen seizures before. Marcus had them sometimes after the accident, when the scar tissue in his brain misfired. But this was different. This wasn't just neurological. This was agony. Pure, unfiltered agony radiating off him in waves. The storm. The sensory overload. The thunder and lightning must have triggered something in his already hypersensitive nervous system. Without thinking, Vanessa grabbed his wrists, trying to stop him from hurting himself. His skin was ice cold and slick with sweat. She pinned his hands to the floor, leaning her weight over him. "Mr. Co, listen to me. You need to breathe. Just breathe." His eyes found hers. For a second, there was recognition, terror. And then his body convulsed again, harder this time, and she felt him try to pull away. But she didn't let go. She couldn't. He was going to hurt himself, break something, choke on his own tongue. So she did the one thing Mrs. Choi had told her never, ever to do. She pressed her bare hand against his forehead. The reaction was immediate. Hyun-woo went completely still. Not the stillness of unconsciousness, but the stillness of shock. His eyes widened, locked on hers, and Vanessa watched as something impossible happened. The pain in his expression dissolved. The tension in his body unwound. His breathing, which had been ragged and desperate, evened out into something slow and deep. He stared at her like he'd seen a ghost. "Why?" His voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "Why does it not burn?" Vanessa didn't understand the question. Her hand was still on his forehead, her pulse racing, her mind spinning. "What?" "Your touch." His eyes searched hers, wild and disbelieving. "It doesn't hurt." She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if she should pull away or stay exactly where she was. So she stayed. And slowly, carefully, Hyun-woo reached up and wrapped his bare fingers around her wrist. His grip was gentle, testing, like he expected the pain to come any second and he was bracing for it. But it didn't come. Vanessa could see the disbelief spreading across his face, followed by something that looked dangerously close to hope. "I don't understand," he whispered. Neither did she, but she could feel his pulse beneath her fingertips, racing and erratic, slowly beginning to calm. She could feel the warmth of his skin, the faint tremor running through him, and she realized, suddenly, that this was the first time she'd ever really touched another person, and felt nothing unusual. No discomfort, no hesitation, just the simple, human act of connection. The lights flickered back on. The generator had finally kicked in, bathing the hallway in pale emergency lighting. Hyun-woo was still staring at her, his hand still wrapped around her wrist, his expression raw and unguarded in a way she'd never seen before. "Don't let go," he said. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. So Vanessa didn't. She stayed there on the floor beside him, her hand on his forehead, his fingers circling her wrist, while the storm raged on outside and something fundamental shifted between them. She didn't know what it meant, didn't know what would happen when the storm ended and reality returned. But for now, in the darkness, with the world falling apart around them, Seo Hyun-woo, the untouchable Shadow King, was holding on to her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. And maybe, in that moment, she was. They stayed like that for nearly an hour. Hyun-woo's breathing gradually returned to normal, his grip on her wrist loosening but never releasing. Outside, the storm began to exhaust itself, the thunder growing distant, the wind dying down to a low moan. Finally, he spoke. "How is this possible?" Vanessa shook her head. "I don't know. You should hurt me. Everyone hurts me. Their emotions, their pain, it all transfers through touch, like electricity. But you..." He lifted his other hand, the one that wasn't holding her wrist, and carefully touched her cheek. His fingers trembled. "You feel like silence." She didn't know how to respond to that. Didn't know how to explain something she didn't understand herself. "Can you stand?" she asked softly. He nodded, but when he tried to move, his legs wouldn't cooperate. The seizure had taken everything out of him. Vanessa shifted, wrapping his arm around her shoulders, helping him to his feet. He leaned heavily against her, and she felt the full weight of him. Solid, warm, devastatingly real. They made their way slowly to his private quarters. Vanessa had never been allowed inside before, but he guided her through the doors with a key card from his pocket. The room was exactly what she'd expected. Minimalist, expensive, cold. A massive bed with black silk sheets. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. Art on the walls that looked curated for royalty. Each piece glowing under soft, expensive lighting. She helped him to the bed, and he sank onto it, his head falling back against the pillows. He still hadn't let go of her wrist. "You should rest," Vanessa said. "I'll get Mrs. Choi." "No." His grip tightened. "Don't leave, please." The vulnerability in his voice stopped her. This wasn't the Shadow King. This was just a man who'd been drowning in isolation for 12 years, and had finally found something that felt like air. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." She sat on the edge of the bed, and Hyun-woo shifted, resting his head in her lap. The gesture was so intimate, so trusting, that it made her chest ache. She carefully placed her hand on his temple, feeling his pulse beneath her fingers, slow and steady now. "Tell me about yourself," he murmured. "I want to hear your voice." So she did. She told him about growing up in the Bronx, about Marcus and the accident that had left him paralyzed from the waist down. She told him about her mother who worked double shifts as a home health aide and still couldn't afford her medications. She told him about the mold in their apartment and the landlord who didn't care and the scholarships she'd lost when she had to drop out of community college to work full-time. He listened without interrupting, his eyes closed, his breathing deep and even. And when she finished, he said quietly, "You're stronger than you know. I'm just surviving. That's what strength is." Surviving when giving up would be easier. They fell into comfortable silence. Outside, the storm had finally passed, leaving the world washed clean and quiet. Hyun-woo's breathing had evened out into sleep, but his hand still rested on her knee, maintaining contact even in unconsciousness. Vanessa knew she should leave, knew that staying here, in his bed, crossed every professional line, but she couldn't bring herself to move, couldn't bring herself to break the connection that seemed to be keeping him peaceful, so she stayed. And somewhere in the early hours of morning, she fell asleep too, her hand still resting on his temple, their breathing synchronized in the darkness. When Mrs. Choi found them at dawn, the older woman's face went carefully blank. But she didn't scold, didn't lecture. She just looked at Vanessa with something that might have been understanding and said quietly, "Mr. So wants to see you in his office. 10 o'clock. Vanessa's stomach dropped. This was it. The firing, the severance, the end. She nodded and slipped out of the room, careful not to wake him. The morning after the storm, Vanessa woke to find Mrs. Choi standing in the doorway of her room, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Seo wants to see you in his office. 10 o'clock. Vanessa's stomach dropped. She'd broken the cardinal rule. She'd touched him. And even though he'd asked her not to let go, even though he'd clung to her for nearly an hour until the seizure fully passed and he could stand on his own, she knew that in the cold light of day, things would be different. She expected to be fired, or worse. She dressed quickly, pulling her hair back into a neat bun, and made her way down the stairs. The house looked pristine, as if the storm had never happened. Windows cleaned, debris cleared, every surface gleaming, as if the world had reset itself overnight. But Vanessa knew better. Some things, once broken, didn't go back to the way they were. Mrs. Choi stopped outside the heavy oak door of Hyun-woo's office, knocked twice, and left without a word. Vanessa stood alone in the hallway, her hands trembling slightly, before a voice from inside called, "Enter." She pushed the door open. The office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the snow-dusted mountains. Dark wood furniture that looked centuries old. Walls lined with abstract art that Vanessa suspected was worth more than her entire life. And behind a massive mahogany desk sat Hyun-woo, dressed in a crisp black shirt, his gloves back in place. His expression as controlled and unreadable as ever. Vanessa closed the door behind her and stood just inside, keeping her eyes lowered. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. She waited for the accusation, the dismissal, the anger. Instead, Hyun-woo said quietly, "Sit." She looked up, startled. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. It took her a moment to move, her legs feeling strangely unsteady. She sat, folding her hands in her lap, and finally met his gaze. His dark eyes were studying her with that same intense focus from last night, but now there was something else layered beneath it. Confusion, wariness. and something that looked almost like hunger. "You saved my life," he said finally. Vanessa blinked. I just did what anyone would." "No." His voice was sharp, cutting through her deflection. "Anyone else would have called for help, would have kept their distance, would have followed the rules." He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "You broke every rule I've set for this household. Do you understand how serious that is?" Her throat tightened. "Yes, sir. And yet you did it anyway." She didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Hyun-woo was quiet for a long moment, his gaze never leaving hers. Then he stood, moving around the desk with that same predatory grace she'd noticed the first day. He stopped a few feet away from her, closer than he'd ever been when he wasn't in the grip of a seizure, close enough that she could smell the faint scent of cedar and something darker, something that reminded her of smoke. "I need you to understand something, Miss Williams." His voice had dropped lower, more intimate. "What happened last night was impossible. For 12 years, I have not been able to tolerate human touch without experiencing excruciating pain. I feel what others feel. Their guilt, their rage, their sorrow, amplified into physical agony. It's not psychological, it's neurological. My condition was caused by prolonged neural trauma combined with electroshock conditioning. My empathic responses were weaponized, turned inward." He paused, and she saw his jaw tighten. "And then you touched me, and I felt nothing. Not pain. Not corruption. Just silence." He said the word like it was sacred, like it was something he'd been searching for his whole life and had finally, impossibly, found. "I don't know why it works with you," he continued. "I don't know if it's permanent or temporary or if it will disappear as suddenly as it appeared. But I need to know if it happens again." He paused, and Vanessa saw something vulnerable flicker across his face. "I need you to stay close." Her heart was pounding now. "What are you asking me to do?" "I'm promoting you. You'll no longer be a cleaner. You'll be my personal attendant. You'll accompany me to meetings, to appointments, to every part of my day where I might be in proximity to others." His jaw tightened. "Your presence seems to dampen the effect. Even when we're not touching, when you're near me, the noise is quieter." Vanessa's mind was reeling. This was insane. She wasn't qualified to be anyone's personal attendant. She barely knew how to navigate this world of wealth and violence and power. But then she thought about Marcus, about the bills piling up, about the fact that Mrs. Choi had already mentioned the salary for this position would be triple what she was currently making. "And if I refuse?" The words were out before she could stop them. Hyun-woo's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "You won't." It wasn't a threat. It was a certainty. And Vanessa realized, with a chill running down her spine, that he was right. She wouldn't refuse, couldn't refuse, not just because of the money, but because something in her recognized the desperation in his voice, the same desperation she heard in her own when she begged hospital administrators for payment extensions. "When do I start?" she asked quietly. The tension in Hyun-woo's shoulders eased slightly. "Immediately. Mrs. Choi will brief you on the schedule, but there's one more thing." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver card. "This is your access key. You'll have clearance to every room in this house, including my private quarters. There may be times when I need you close without warning. Do you understand?" Vanessa took the card, the metal cold against her palm. "Yes, sir." "Good." He turned away, moving back to his desk. And just like that, the moment of vulnerability was gone. He was the Shadow King again, cold, controlled, untouchable. "That will be all." Vanessa stood, her legs unsteady, and walked to the door. But before she could open it, his voice stopped her. "Miss Williams." She turned back. He was watching her again, his expression unreadable. "Thank you. For last night." The words were stiff, awkward, like he wasn't used to saying them. Like gratitude was a foreign language he'd long forgotten how to speak. Vanessa nodded once and left, closing the door softly behind her. She didn't realize until she was halfway down the hall that her hands were shaking. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of proximity and silence. Vanessa learned the rhythms of Hyun-woo's world. The meetings conducted in cold conference rooms with men who looked at her like she was a curiosity or a threat. The phone calls taken in rapid Korean that she couldn't understand but could feel the tension in. The late nights when he worked until dawn and she sat in the corner of his office with a book, existing as a silent anchor. She learned that he was right. Her presence did something to him. Even across a room, she could see the way his breathing eased when she entered, the way the sharp lines of pain around his eyes softened. The way he could tolerate being in the same space as his lieutenants without flinching as long as she was near. She became his human shield, his biological painkiller, his silence. And slowly, carefully, they began to touch more. It started small, his bare hand brushing hers when she handed him a document, his fingers grazing her shoulder when he needed to pass behind her chair. Each touch was an experiment, a test to see if the magic would hold. And it always did. But then it became something else, something neither of them acknowledged, but both felt. Late one night, after a particularly brutal meeting with a rival faction, Hyun-woo sat at his desk with his head in his hands, his gloves off, his whole body radiating exhaustion. Vanessa had been reading in the corner, as she always did, but she could feel the weight of his fatigue pressing against her. Without thinking, she stood and crossed the room. She stopped behind his chair, hesitating only a moment before placing her hands on his shoulders. Hyun-woo went completely still, but he didn't pull away. Vanessa felt the tension in his muscles, the knots of stress wound tight beneath her palms. Slowly, carefully, she began to knead the tension away, her thumbs working circles along his shoulder blades. A low sound escaped his throat, something between a groan and a sigh. His head dropped forward, and Vanessa felt him surrender to her touch in a way that felt dangerously intimate. "Does this hurt?" she asked softly. "No." His voice was rough, strained. It feels like being human again." Her hands stilled for a moment. Then she continued, working her way up to the base of his neck, feeling the way his breathing deepened, the way his pulse slowed beneath her fingertips. They stayed like that for a long time. The only sound was the distant hum of the house's heating system and the soft whisper of her hands against his shirt. Finally, Hyun-woo reached up and caught her wrist, stopping her. He turned in his chair, looking up at her with eyes that were too dark, too intense. "You should go. Get some rest." It wasn't what he wanted to say. Vanessa could see it in the way his fingers tightened around her wrist, the way his gaze lingered on her face like he was memorizing every detail. But she nodded and stepped back, breaking the contact. "Good night, Mr. Seo." Hyun-woo. The word was quiet, almost reluctant. "When we're alone, you can call me Hyun-woo." Vanessa's breath caught. It felt like a gift. A dangerous, intimate gift that she shouldn't accept but couldn't refuse. "Good night, Hyun-woo." She left before she could see the way his expression crumbled the moment the door closed. Before she could see him press his bare hand to the spot where hers had been, chasing the warmth she'd left behind. In the hallway, Vanessa leaned against the wall, her heart racing. She pressed her palm flat against her chest, trying to calm the storm building inside her. This was dangerous. Not just because of the world he lived in, but because of what she was starting to feel every time he looked at her. Every time he said her name. Every time his skin met hers, and the world fell away. She was becoming addicted to being his silence, and she had a terrible feeling that he was becoming addicted to her. The next day, Jinsu arrived. Vanessa was in the library, organizing files for Hyun-woo's afternoon meetings, when she heard the commotion in the entrance hall. Voices raised in greeting, the kind of false warmth that meant danger. She moved to the doorway, staying in the shadows, and watched as Hyun-woo descended the main staircase to meet his half-brother. Jinsu was handsome in a way that felt wrong. Too polished, too perfect, like a snake wearing human skin. He smiled as he embraced Hyun-woo, but his eyes were calculating, cold. "Little brother, you look well, Jinsu." Hyun-woo's voice was carefully neutral. "I wasn't expecting you. I was in the area, thought I'd check in. The elders are asking questions about your health." Jinsu's gaze swept the room and landed on Vanessa. His smile widened. "And who is this?" "My personal attendant." "Interesting." Jinsu took a step toward her, and Vanessa felt something predatory in his approach. "I don't recall you keeping staff so close before." "Things change." "Indeed, they do." Jinsu circled her slowly, and Vanessa forced herself to stay still, to keep her expression blank. "What's your name?" "Vanessa Williams, sir." "American. How refreshing." He reached out, as if to touch her shoulder, and Hyun-woo moved faster than she'd ever seen him move, his hand, still gloved, catching Jinsu's wrist. "Don't." Jinsu raised an eyebrow. "Protective, are we?" "She's mine. You don't touch what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice sent heat through Vanessa's chest. Jinsu must have felt it too, because his smile turned sharp. "Of course. My apologies." He pulled his hand back. "I wouldn't dream of overstepping." But as Jinsu walked away, Vanessa caught the look he threw over his shoulder, calculating, interested, dangerous. Mrs. Choi had been right. Jinsu was dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with violence. That night, after Jinsu had retired to the guest wing, Hyunwoo summoned Vanessa to his private quarters. She found him standing at the eastern window, staring out at the mountains, his gloves off, his hands pressed against the cold glass. "He knows," Hyunwoo said quietly. "He saw the way I reacted, the way I protected you. He knows you're different. Is that a problem? It's a vulnerability. And Jinsu collects vulnerabilities like other people collect art." He turned to face her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was staggering. "I should send you away, somewhere he can't reach you. But you won't." "No." His voice was rough. "I can't. I need you too much." Vanessa crossed the room slowly, stopping when she was close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "Then we deal with Jinsu together." He reached out, his bare hand cupping her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You don't understand what he's capable of. Then tell me." So he did. He told her about the White Room, about Mireille and her betrayal, about the way Jinsu had orchestrated everything to break him, to make him into the perfect, ruthless heir their father wanted, about the 12 years he'd spent building walls around himself, convinced that isolation was the only way to survive. And when he finished, Vanessa took his face in both her hands and said, "He didn't break you. He just taught you how strong you are." Hyunwoo's eyes closed, and she felt him lean into her touch like a man dying of thirst, finally finding water. "You make me want to believe that." "Then believe it." He opened his eyes, and the hunger in them made her breath catch. "Vanessa, tell me to stop." "Stop what?" "This." He reached up with his free hand, his bare fingers brushing along her jawline, tilting her face up toward his. "Because if I start, I don't know if I'll be able to." Her heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, that crossing this line would complicate everything, that she was an employee and he was her boss and this could only end badly. But when she looked into his eyes, she didn't see her boss. She saw a man who'd been starving for human connection for over a decade. A man who'd found something impossible in her touch. A man who was looking at her like she was the only real thing in a world of shadows. "Don't stop," she whispered. Hyunwoo closed the distance between them in a heartbeat. His lips met hers with desperate gentleness, like he was afraid she might disappear if he held on too tight. One hand cupped her face while the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her against him. Vanessa's eyes fluttered closed. She'd been kissed before, but never like this. Never with such reverence and hunger tangled together. Never with the feeling that she was both saving someone and being saved at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Hyunwoo rested his forehead against hers. "This is insane," he murmured. "I know. I could destroy you, just by letting you close. I know. And you're still not running." Vanessa opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. "I told you. I'm not going anywhere." He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands moving through her hair, down her back, mapping the curves of her body through her clothes like he was memorizing her through touch. And Vanessa let herself fall into it, let herself forget about the dangerous world he lived in, let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this impossible thing between them could be real. They moved from the window to his bed in a blur of heated kisses and whispered words. When they tumbled onto the black silk sheets, Hyunwoo pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes searching. "Are you sure?" Vanessa answered by pulling him back down to her. The world narrowed to the feeling of his skin against hers, the sound of his breathing, the way he touched her like she was something precious and fragile and worth protecting. He mapped every inch of her with his hands, his lips, as if committing her to memory. And she did the same, learning the topography of his scars, the places that made him gasp, the way his body responded to hers with a hunger that felt like devotion. When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that made her chest ache. He held her gaze the entire time, his fingers laced with hers, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization. And in that moment, Vanessa understood what silence really meant. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something so profound that words became unnecessary. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her body curved against his bare arm draped possessively over her waist. She could feel his heartbeat against her back, steady and strong. "Stay," he murmured sleepily, his arm tightening. "Please, I'm not going anywhere," she whispered back. She felt him smile against her shoulder. And for a moment, the world was perfect. But 3 floors below, in the guest wing, Jinsu stood at his window with a phone pressed to his ear. his voice low and cold. "I need a full background check on Vanessa Williams. Everything. Where she came from, who she loves, what she fears." He paused, listening. "And I need you to acquire something for me. A very specific type of neurotoxin. One that mimics natural causes." He ended the call and smiled at his reflection in the dark glass. The anchor had been identified. Now it was time to cut the line. The dinner invitation came on a Thursday evening, delivered by Mrs. Choi, with an expression that suggested she disapproved but wouldn't dare say so out loud. "Mr. Seo would like you to join him for dinner tonight. 8 o'clock. In the formal dining room." Vanessa looked up from the book she'd been reading, startled. They'd been sharing his bed for 3 nights now, but those had been private moments, stolen in darkness. This felt different. Public. A declaration. Join him? Those were his instructions. Mrs. Choi's lips pressed into a thin line. "I've laid out something suitable in your room." When Vanessa returned to her quarters, she found a dress hanging on the back of her door. Deep emerald green silk that looked like it had been tailored specifically for her body. She ran her fingers over the fabric, her stomach fluttering with something between excitement and apprehension. This wasn't professional. This crossed a line they'd been carefully avoiding in daylight. But she put the dress on anyway. At exactly 8 o'clock, Vanessa descended the stairs to find the formal dining room transformed. The long table that usually sat empty and austere was set for 2. Candles flickering in crystal holders, soft music playing from hidden speakers. It looked like a scene from a movie, romantic and impossibly elegant and utterly terrifying. Hyun-woo stood near the windows, dressed in all black as always, but tonight without the gloves. His bare hands were clasped behind his back, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. When he heard her enter, he turned, and for just a moment something unguarded flickered across his face. "You look beautiful." The words were simple, quiet, but they hit Vanessa like a physical thing, stealing the breath from her lungs. "Thank you." He gestured to the chair at his right. Not across the table, but next to him. "Close. Please. Sit." The meal was prepared by the estate's cook, but Hyun-woo had clearly given specific instructions. Each dish was carefully chosen. Nothing too rich, nothing too spicy. Comfort food elevated to art. Roasted chicken with herbs, perfectly seasoned vegetables, warm bread that smelled like home. They ate in companionable silence at first. But then, Hyun-woo spoke, his voice low and almost hesitant. "I wanted to thank you, properly, for everything you've done these past weeks." Vanessa set down her fork, her heart beating faster. "You don't need to thank me. It's my job." "No." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes intense. "It stopped being just a job the night you saved me. You could have walked away, collected your severance and disappeared. But you stayed." She didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to explain that leaving had never felt like an option, that something in her had recognized something in him, and walking away would have felt like abandoning a part of herself. "I wanted to stay," she said softly. Hyun-woo held her gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached across the small distance between them and took her hand, his bare fingers intertwined with hers, warm and sure and devastating. "I haven't had a meal with another person in 12 years, he admitted. I'd forgotten what it felt like. To not eat alone. Vanessa's chest tightened. She squeezed his hand gently, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. "You're not alone anymore." Something shifted in his expression. Something that looked dangerously close to hope. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a soft, reverent kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, courtly, and it made her feel like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. They finished the meal like that, hands linked on the table between them, speaking in quiet voices about everything and nothing. Vanessa told him about Marcus, about her childhood in the Bronx, about the mother who worked herself to exhaustion trying to keep them fed. Hyun-woo listened like every word mattered, his thumb tracing absent circles on the back of her hand. And then he told her things he'd never told anyone. About the White Room, about Mireille and her betrayal, about the way he'd built his empire not out of ambition, but out of necessity. Because if he was powerful enough, untouchable enough, maybe no one could hurt him again. "But power doesn't fix this," he said quietly, gesturing to himself. "It just makes the cage more comfortable." Vanessa turned her hand in his, lacing their fingers together more firmly. "You're not in a cage anymore." His eyes met hers, dark and hungry and achingly vulnerable. "Aren't I?" Before she could answer, He stood, pulling her gently to her feet. They were standing so close now that Vanessa could feel the heat radiating from his body, could smell the cedar and smoke scent of him, could see the faint scar along his jawline that she'd never noticed before. Vanessa. Her name on his lips was a prayer and a confession. I need you to understand something. What I feel for you. It terrifies me, because everyone I've ever cared about has either betrayed me or been taken from me. And if Jinsu realizes how much you mean to me, he'll use you to destroy me. Then we don't let him realize it. He already suspects. The way I reacted when he tried to touch you, the fact that I'm keeping you close. His jaw tightened. He's been making calls, having you investigated. I have people monitoring him, but I can't stop him without revealing that I know. Fear flickered through Vanessa's chest. What does he want? Everything. The syndicate. My power. My suffering. Hyun-woo cupped her face with both hands, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. He won't stop until he's taken everything from me. And now that includes you. So what do? We survive. Together. He leaned down, resting his forehead against hers. And we trust each other, completely, no matter what happens. Can you do that? Yes. He kissed her then, slow and deep, pouring every unspoken fear and promise into the contact. And Vanessa kissed him back, trying to convey that she understood, that she was choosing this, choosing him. Despite the danger, when they broke apart, Hyun-woo took her hand and led her back to his quarters. They made love with a desperation that felt like goodbye, even though neither of them said the words. And afterward, as Vanessa fell asleep in his arms, she didn't notice the way his eyes stayed open, staring at the ceiling, his mind already calculating threats and contingencies. He didn't notice the staff member who'd been paid handsomely to slip a small glass vial into Vanessa's apron pocket while it hung in the staff room. Didn't notice the way Jinsu's mole moved through the kitchen, adding a clear, tasteless liquid to the filtered water Hyun-woo drank every morning. By sunrise, everything would begin to unravel, and neither of them would see it coming. Hyun-woo woke before dawn, as he always did, his internal clock precise as machinery. Vanessa was still asleep, her body curved against his, her breathing deep and even. He allowed himself 5 minutes to just watch her. The way the early light painted her skin, the peaceful expression on her face, the trust evident in the way she slept in his bed without fear. 5 minutes. Then he carefully extracted himself, dressed in silence, and went to his office to handle the morning reports from his lieutenants. The water was waiting on his desk, as it always was, filtered, chilled, in a crystal glass. He drank half of it while reviewing overnight communications from his contacts in Seoul, barely tasting it. The first twinge came 20 minutes later. Sharp. Wrong. A burning in his chest that had nothing to do with his condition. He ignored it. Stress, probably. The elders had been pushing hard lately, and Jinsu's presence in the house set his nerves on edge. But then it came again. Stronger this time. A searing pain that spread through his veins like liquid fire, followed by a wave of nausea so intense he had to grip the edge of his desk. Poison. The realization was immediate and certain. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled. He caught himself against the wall, his vision blurring, his chest feeling like it was being crushed from the inside. Blood flooded his mouth, dark, arterial, wrong. He managed to hit the panic button beneath his desk before he collapsed. His guards found him 30 seconds later, convulsing on the floor, blood staining his lips and shirt. They carried him to his bed while someone called the estate physician and Mrs. Choi began a lockdown protocol. And then the head of security entered, holding a small glass vial in a gloved hand, his expression grim. "Sir, we found this in Miss Williams' apron." Hyun-woo stared at the vial through blurring vision. Clear liquid, unmistakable. A neurotoxin designed to mimic cardiac arrest. "No." The word came out strangled. "She's the only one with access to your private water supply. She brings it to your office every morning." "No." His voice was stronger now, but his body was betraying him, the pain intensifying. And beneath it, worse than the physical agony, his condition was returning, the ghost pain flooding back as doubt crept in. Every touch from the physician felt like knives. Every voice in the room scraped against his nerves like broken glass. Because he'd been here before. He'd trusted before. And Mireille had smiled while she handed him to his torturers. What if this was the same? What if Vanessa was just another weapon sent by his enemies, by Jinsu? What if everything, the touch, the peace, the connection, was just an elaborate trap? The thought alone made the pain worse, made his condition spike, made every nerve in his body scream. "Bring her here," he said finally, his voice dead, empty. "I want to see her." They brought Vanessa to him 10 minutes later, her hair still mussed from sleep, confusion and terror warring on her face. She rushed to his bedside, reaching for him, but his guard stopped her. "Don't," Hyunwoo said quietly. "Don't touch me." Vanessa froze, hurt flashing across her features. "What's happening? They said you were poisoned. Are you okay? Did you do it?" The question was flat, clinical. "Did I... what? No!" "Hyunwoo, what are you talking about?" The head of security held up the vial. "This was found in your possession." Vanessa's face went pale. "I've never seen that before in my life." "It was in the pocket of your green dress. The one we found in your room. Then someone put it there." "Hyunwoo, please, you have to believe me." "I would never." That's what she said too. His voice was so cold it could have frozen the sun. "The last woman I trusted. Right before she handed me over to be tortured." Tears streamed down Vanessa's face now. "I'm not her. I'm not whoever hurt you. I love you." The words should have moved him, should have broken through the ice forming around his heart. But all he could feel was the poison in his veins, and the phantom pain returning and the crushing weight of betrayal. His mind flashed to Mireille's face, to the way she'd kissed him goodbye the morning before the white room, to the way she'd smiled. Vanessa was smiling last night. Vanessa had access to his quarters, his office, his food, his water. Vanessa was the only person he'd allowed close in 12 years. Perfect target. Perfect weapon. "Take her to the soundproof room," he ordered. "Lock her in. Post guards. No one enters without my permission." "No." Vanessa struggled against the guards, but they were too strong. "Hyunwoo, please. Listen to me. It's a trap. Someone is setting me up. It's Jinsu. It has to be Jinsu." But he'd already turned his face away, unable to look at her. Unable to reconcile the woman who'd slept in his arms with the woman who might have tried to kill him. They dragged her from the room, her protests echoing down the hallway until a door slammed shut and there was only silence. Hyunwoo closed his eyes, letting the physician continue his work. The antidote was helping. His vitals were stabilizing. But the ghost pain continued to grow, spreading through his nervous system like wildfire now that Vanessa was gone. He should feel vindicated, protected, safe. Instead, he just felt empty, and somewhere deep in his chest, beneath the poison and the pain, a small voice whispered that he'd just made a terrible mistake. 3 days passed like years. Hyunwoo recovered physically, the poison flushed from his system, his vitals returning to normal. But the ghost pain grew stronger every hour. Without Vanessa nearby, the world became unbearable again. Every touch was agony. Every voice was nails on glass. Every moment felt like drowning. He locked himself in his quarters, refusing visitors, refusing food, refusing everything except the medications that barely dulled the pain. The gloves went back on, but they didn't help. Nothing helped. Mrs. Choi brought reports twice a day, leaving them outside his door. The syndicate was fracturing. The elders were questioning his fitness to lead. Jinsu had called an emergency council meeting to discuss succession contingencies. Hyunwoo read the reports and felt nothing. Just the endless, grinding pain of existing in his own skin. On the third night, Jinsu visited. He knocked once and entered without waiting for permission, finding Hyunwoo standing at the eastern window staring at nothing. "Brother," Jinsu's voice was carefully concerned, but Hyunwoo heard the satisfaction beneath it. "I heard what happened. The girl. I'm sorry. I know you cared for her. Get out. I only came to... Get out." Jinsu lingered for a moment, and Hyunwoo caught his reflection in the window, saw the ghost of a smile on his half-brother's face, saw the victory in his eyes. And in that moment, clarity struck like lightning. Jinsu. It had always been Jinsu. The poison, the evidence planted in Vanessa's apron, the convenient timing, all of it reeked of his half-brother's manipulation. The investigation he'd ordered into her background had come back clean. Too clean. No connections to rival factions, no hidden motives, no reason to betray him except the money, and the amount Jinsu would have needed to pay her would have shown up in her accounts. But there was nothing. Because Vanessa was innocent, and he'd locked her in a soundproof room for 3 days based on fabricated evidence. "Actually," Hyunwoo said, his voice still dead but his mind suddenly sharp. "Stay. I want to talk about the council meeting." Jinsu's smile widened. "Of course. Whatever you need." They talked for 20 minutes about procedures and protocols, and the entire time, Hyunwoo was calculating. Jinsu had cameras throughout the estate. He knew that now, which meant whatever he did next had to look convincing, had to look like the ruthless Shadow King handling a traitor. When Jinsu finally left, Hyunwoo waited exactly 10 minutes. Then he called for his head of security. "I'm going to see the prisoner. Alone. No guards. No cameras in the soundproof room. I want complete privacy." "Sir, I don't think..." "That wasn't a request." The soundproof room was in the basement, behind 3 locked doors. Hyunwoo dismissed the guards at the entrance and used his master key to enter alone, his footsteps echoing in the concrete stairwell. His heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the desperate hope that he wasn't too late, that 3 days hadn't broken her, that she would forgive him for this. He opened the final door. The room was exactly what its name suggested. Walls lined with acoustic foam, no windows, a single overhead light that cast everything in harsh white, and against the far wall sat Vanessa, her arms wrapped around her knees, her face hollow and exhausted. Her wrists were raw and bloody from the guard's zip ties, yet she rested her chin directly on the open wounds, seemingly oblivious to the sting. When she saw him, she didn't stand, didn't speak, just watched him with eyes that held no hope left. Hyunwoo's chest cracked open. He crossed the room slowly, every step an apology he didn't know how to voice. When he reached her, he knelt, bringing himself to her level. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. You didn't believe me." Her voice was hoarse from crying, from screaming, from 3 days of isolation. "I told you the truth, and you didn't believe me. I know. I let my past poison my present. I let fear make me cruel." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. The rejection hurt worse than any physical pain he'd ever endured. "Vanessa, please. I know who did this. I know you're innocent. Let me fix this." "How?" She finally looked at him, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. "How do you fix 3 days of thinking I tried to murder the man I love? 3 days of being locked in a room, alone, thinking you were going to kill me?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'll spend the rest of my life trying if you'll let me." They sat in silence, and Hyunwoo could feel his condition screaming at him, demanding he retreat from the proximity, from the emotion. But he stayed. He'd stay forever if that's what it took. Finally, Vanessa spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jinsu did this, didn't he?" "Yes. And he's watching. Right now, he has cameras. Not in here, but everywhere else, yes." Hyunwoo's jaw tightened. "Which means we need to give him a show. Make him think you're dead. Make him think he's won." Vanessa's eyes widened. "What are you asking me to do? Trust me. One more time. I know I don't deserve it. I know I've broken that trust, but I need you to trust me now. When it matters most." He moved closer, his hand hovering near her face but not touching. "I'm going to take you out of here. Make it look like an execution. Jinsu's people will be watching the exterior cameras. But my most loyal guard will help. You'll be smuggled out, taken to a safe house, and we'll let Jinsu think you're gone. And then what? Then I deal with Jinsu, permanently. But I can't do that if he knows you're alive. He'll use you against me. He'll hurt you to hurt me." Hyunwoo's voice cracked. "I can't let that happen." Vanessa studied his face for a long moment. Then slowly, she reached out and touched his cheek. Hyunwoo closed his eyes, feeling the peace return like a tide, feeling the ghost pain recede, feeling human again. "I need you to trust me," she said quietly. "Not just about this. About everything. Can you do that?" "Yes." He turned his head, kissing her palm. "I swear it. Then get me out of here, and help me prove who really did this." Hyunwoo smiled, genuine for perhaps the first time in days. "Gladly." He stood, helping her to her feet. Then he pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, his face buried in her hair. "I love you," he whispered. "I should have said it before. Should have believed you. But I love you, and I will never doubt you again." Vanessa's arms tightened around him. "I love you too, even when you're an idiot." He laughed, a sound he hadn't made in years. Then he pulled back, his expression growing serious. "What happens next is going to be hard. You'll have to play dead, stay hidden, trust people you don't know. Can you do that?" "Yes, but Hyunwoo." She looked up at him, her eyes fierce. "When this is over, when Jinsu is dealt with, I want him to know it was me. I want him to see my face and know he failed." "Done." He kissed her forehead. Then he stepped back, his expression shifting, becoming the Shadow King again, cold, ruthless. Now scream. Make it loud. Make it convincing. Vanessa understood immediately. She opened her mouth and screamed. A sound of pure terror that would carry through the concrete walls to the guards outside. Hyunwoo grabbed her throat. Gently, carefully, his thumb positioned so it looked brutal on the camera in the hallway, but applied no real pressure. His grip slipped, tightening enough to bruise. Any other woman would have winced from the sharp pain, but Vanessa's face remained blank, fighting only for air, completely unbothered by the agony of his fingers digging into her skin. She clawed at his hands, her acting perfect. "You poisoned me," he said loudly, his voice carrying. "You betrayed me, and now you die." He pulled his gun from his shoulder holster, pressed it against her temple, and Vanessa went limp in his arms, trusting him completely. The gunshot was deafening in the small space. The bullet buried itself in the acoustic foam 2 inches from where her head had been, close enough that the muzzle flash singed her hair, close enough that anyone listening would believe it had found its target. Vanessa collapsed, her body perfectly slack, and Hyunwoo caught her, lowering her to the ground. He knelt beside her, his hand checking for a pulse that was still beating strong and steady. Then he stood, his face a mask of cold satisfaction, and opened the door. His head of security stood outside, along with his most loyal guard, a man named Taemin who'd served the Seo family for 20 years. "It's done," Hyunwoo said flatly. "Taemin, dispose of the body, quietly. I don't want questions." Taemin bowed, understanding flickering in his eyes. "Yes, sir." The other guard hesitated. "Sir, shouldn't we? Are you questioning me?" "No, sir. Of course not." "Good. Leave us." The guard left. Taemin entered the room and carefully lifted Vanessa's body, wrapping her in black canvas. Her eyes were closed, her breathing so shallow it was barely perceptible. Perfect. As Taemin carried her past, Hyunwoo didn't look, didn't allow himself a single tell that might give away the truth. He just stood there, cold and empty, while the woman he loved was carried away like a corpse. When the door closed, Hyunwoo finally allowed himself to move. He leaned against the wall, his hands shaking, his chest tight. He'd done it. The first part of the plan was complete, but as he climbed the stairs back to the main house, he felt the ghost pain returning, felt the silence slipping away, felt the isolation closing in again like a fist around his throat. 3 days without her had been agony. Now he was facing weeks, maybe months, until he could neutralize Jinsu and bring her back. He just had to survive until then. In the guest wing, Jinsu stood at his window with a glass of whiskey, watching through the security feed as Taemin loaded a body bag into an unmarked van. He smiled, satisfied. The anchor was cut. The ship was sinking. Soon, the Jangmi syndicate would be his. He didn't notice the way Taemin glanced at the camera. Didn't notice the way the old guard's expression held something that looked like contempt. Didn't notice that he'd already lost, even though he thought he'd won. The safe house was a gray concrete box tucked into the mountains 40 miles from the estate. 1 room, 1 window with bars, a cot that smelled like disinfectant. Taemin had driven her there in the back of a refrigerated van, her body wrapped in canvas like she really was a corpse, the cold seeping into her bones until she couldn't feel her fingers. When he finally let her out, his weathered face was apologetic. "I'm sorry, Miss Williams, but if anyone sees you alive, they'll kill you for real, and they'll kill Mr. CO2. Vanessa nodded, her throat still raw from screaming. "How long?" "As long as it takes." Taemin handed her a burner phone with 1 number programmed in. "Only call if it's life or death. He can't know you're contacting him. Jinsu has people everywhere." Then he left, and Vanessa was alone. The first night, she paced. The room was maybe 12 feet square, the walls pressing in like a fist. She counted her steps, 23, from wall to wall, and thought about Hyunwoo in that soundproof basement, believing she'd betrayed him. The look in his eyes when he'd ordered her locked away had been worse than any physical pain she'd ever endured. She understood why he'd doubted, understood the scars Mireille had left, but understanding didn't make it hurt less. The second night, she tried to sleep but couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt his hand around her throat, felt the cold press of the gun against her temple, felt the split second of pure animal terror before she'd forced herself to trust him completely. He could have killed her, could have decided she was guilty and ended it, but he hadn't. That had to mean something. By the third night, she started watching the news on the small TV Taemin had left. The syndicate was in chaos. Hyunwoo had retreated from public view. The elders were calling emergency meetings, and Jinsu was everywhere. giving interviews, making statements, positioning himself as the stabilizing force. "My brother is grieving," Jinsu told a reporter, his face perfectly solemn. "The betrayal of someone he trusted has taken a severe toll. But the syndicate will endure. I'll make sure of it." Vanessa threw the remote at the screen. It bounced off harmlessly, but the rage felt good, cleansing. She would make him pay. For the poison, for the frame job, for every second of pain he'd caused Hyunwoo. She just had to survive long enough to see it happen. By the 7th night, the isolation was starting to fracture her. She caught herself talking to the walls, having full conversations with imaginary versions of Marcus and her mother. She started rationing the canned food Taemin had left, not because she was running out, but because the act of eating felt wrong when Hyunwoo was suffering. The burner phone never rang. On the 10th night, she broke. Vanessa pulled up the news again, searching for any mention of Hyunwoo. What she found made her blood turn to ice. A grainy photo taken from a distance, Hyunwoo being helped into a car by 2 guards. His body hunched, his face gray. The headline read, "Shadow King's health deteriorating. Sources say syndicate leadership in question." She stared at the image, her hands shaking. He looked like he was dying, like the life was bleeding out of him one day at a time. He looked like a man whose soul had already left, and his body hadn't caught up yet. Because he was. Without her, the ghost pain was consuming him. She knew it with the same certainty she knew her own name. Vanessa looked at the burner phone. Taemin had said only call if it's life or death. This was life or death, just not hers. She dialed the only number. It rang twice before Taemin answered, his voice sharp. "What's wrong?" "He's dying. I saw the photo. He can't do this alone." Her voice cracked. "I need to come back." "Absolutely not. Jinsu has people watching every entrance to the estate. The moment you show your face, then I won't show my face. There has to be a way." She was pacing again, her mind racing. "What about the gala?" "I heard on the news that Jinsu is throwing some kind of event." Silence. Then, carefully, "You want to infiltrate a syndicate gala where half the guests will be Jinsu's allies and the other half are looking for any excuse to challenge Mr. Seo's authority?" "Yes, that's suicide. Then I'll die." The words came out flat, certain. "But I'm not letting him suffer alone anymore. He needs his silence, and I'm the only one who can give it to him." More silence. Then Taemin exhaled slowly. "I'll see what I can do. But if this goes wrong, we all die. You understand that?" "I understand." "Good. Stay by the phone." He hung up. Vanessa sat on the cot, her heart pounding. She thought about the night of the storm, the way Hyunwoo had held her wrist like she was the only thing anchoring him to earth. The way he'd whispered, "Don't let go," like a prayer. She wouldn't let go. Not now, not ever, even if it killed her. 2 days later, Taemin arrived with a garment bag and a plan. "The gala is tomorrow night. Formal. Masks required. Jinsu is calling it a night of renewal for the syndicate." Taemin's expression was grim. "I can get you in as part of the catering staff, but you'll be on your own once you're inside. I've looped the security feed at the service entrance for 10 minutes. That gets you inside. But once you're on the floor, I can't protect you if someone recognizes you." "They won't." Vanessa unzipped the bag. Inside was a sleek black server's uniform and a gold masquerade mask that covered most of her face. "What about Hyunwoo? Will he be there?" "Jinsu is forcing him to attend." A show of unity. Taemin's jaw tightened. "But Miss Williams, you need to understand something. Mr. Seo is not well. The past 2 weeks have broken him in ways I've never seen. He's taking medication just to stand upright. If you approach him and he doesn't recognize you, if he thinks you're a threat, he'll know me." She said it with more confidence than she felt. "He'll know." Taemin studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "There's a car waiting. We leave in an hour." Vanessa changed quickly, pulling her hair into a tight bun, securing the mask. When she looked in the small mirror, she barely recognized herself. Good. That was the point. The drive back to the estate felt endless. Her stomach twisted with nerves, but beneath that was something else. Anticipation, hope. The knowledge that in a few hours, she would see him again, even if it destroyed them both. The estate had been transformed into something from a fever dream. Black silk draped from the ceiling like storm clouds. Gold chandeliers dripped light like honey. And everywhere, on every surface, in every corner, were candles, hundreds of them, casting shadows that moved and breathed. Vanessa followed the other catering staff through the service entrance, her head down, her movements efficient. No one gave her a second glance. She was invisible, a ghost. The main ballroom was already filling with guests. Men in sharp suits and women in gowns that cost more than cars, all wearing elaborate masks. Gold, silver, black lace, jeweled feathers. The air smelled like expensive perfume and danger. At the far end of the room, on a raised platform, sat Jinsu. He looked like a king holding court, his mask a simple black design that somehow made him look more predatory. Beside him, in a chair that might as well have been a throne, sat Hyun-woo. Vanessa's breath caught. He was wearing all black, as always, his mask silver and elegant. But even from across the room, she could see the wrongness in him. The way he held himself too still, like movement cost him. The way his gloved hands gripped the arms of the chair like he was holding on for dear life. He was dying. Slowly, visibly, and no one seemed to care. Vanessa grabbed a tray of champagne flutes and began circulating through the crowd. She kept her head down, her movements smooth, listening to fragments of conversation. Heard he stepped down from operations. Jinsu will be formally announced as successor. Tragic, really. But the syndicate needs strong leadership. Each word was a knife. These people were vultures, circling a man they'd once feared, waiting for him to fall so they could pick his bones clean. Vanessa's grip on the tray tightened. She forced herself to breathe, to stay calm. She couldn't help Hyun-woo if she got herself caught. She worked her way closer to the platform, weaving through clusters of guests. A string quartet played something haunting in the corner. Servers in masks identical to hers moved like shadows, and through it all, Vanessa kept her eyes on Hyun-woo. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, just sat there like a beautiful, broken statue while Jinsu laughed with guests and accepted congratulations. Finally, she was close enough, 10 feet away, then 5. A server passed between them, and Vanessa moved with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years being invisible in wealthy spaces. She slipped past a group of men discussing trade routes, past a woman dripping in diamonds, until she was standing directly in front of the platform. Hyun-woo's eyes were fixed on the middle distance, seeing nothing. The mask covered most of his face, but she could see his jaw, the sharp line of it, the tension in it. Could see the slight tremor in his hands. She had one chance. One moment before someone noticed her standing too long in one spot. Vanessa set down the tray, pulled a small card from her pocket, blank except for 7 words written in her handwriting. "I am still your silence. Trust me." She stepped forward, her heart hammering, and reached for his hand. The moment her fingers touched his glove, Hyun-woo's entire body went rigid. His head snapped toward her, his eyes, visible through the mask, widening with shock. She pressed the card into his palm. Their eyes met, and she saw the exact moment he recognized her. His lips parted, his grip on her hand tightened like a vice. But before he could speak, before he could do anything that would give her away, Vanessa pulled back and melted into the crowd. She didn't look back, didn't stop moving, just grabbed another tray and kept circulating, her pulse racing, her entire body electric with the feeling of his touch. He knew. He knew she was alive. Behind her, she heard the sound of a chair scraping. Heard Jinsu's voice, sharp with concern. "Brother, are you unwell?" "No." Hyun-woo's voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. Clear, alive. "I'm fine. Better than fine." Vanessa risked a glance back. Hyun-woo was standing now, his posture straight, his presence suddenly filling the room in a way it hadn't minutes before. He was scanning the crowd, searching. She turned away before he could find her again. But she felt his gaze like a physical thing, sweeping across the room. Hunting. The viper was awake. For the next hour, Vanessa played her role. She refilled glasses, cleared plates, stayed invisible, but she watched everything. Watched as Hyun-woo moved through the crowd with renewed energy, speaking to guests, shaking hands, always with his gloves on, like he was reclaiming his territory one conversation at a time. Watched as Jinsu's expression grew tighter, more controlled. He'd expected his brother to be weak, pliable. Instead, Hyun-woo was reminding everyone why they'd feared him in the first place. Near midnight, Jinsu called for attention. The music stopped. The crowd gathered. "Thank you all for coming," Jinsu said, his voice smooth as poison. "Tonight we celebrate the syndicate's resilience, its strength, and its future." He gestured to Hyun-woo. My brother has asked me to assume a more active role in operations while he focuses on his health. Effective immediately. I'll be. No. The single word cut through the room like a blade. Hyunwoo stepped forward, removing his mask. His face was still pale, still marked by exhaustion, but his eyes were sharp, focused. I appreciate your concern, brother. But I'm not stepping down. Not now. Not ever. The room went silent. Every eye turned to the two brothers standing on the platform, separated by 3 feet and a lifetime of betrayal. Jinsu's smile never wavered. Hyunwoo, you're not well. Everyone can see. I'm well enough. Hyunwoo's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. And I'm not going anywhere, so whatever plans you've made, whatever moves you've orchestrated, end them. Now, brother. I know what you did. The words were quiet but carried through the silent room. The poison, the evidence, all of it. And I'm giving you one chance to walk away. Take it. Jinsu's mask finally cracked. His smile turned brittle. You're delusional. Grief has broken you. Everyone here can see it. Can they? Hyunwoo looked out at the crowd, and Vanessa saw several guests look away, unwilling to meet his eyes. Or do they see a man who's done letting his enemies think he's weak? The tension was suffocating. Vanessa set down her tray, her hand moving instinctively to the small knife she'd tucked into her uniform. Just in case. Then Jinsu laughed. Very well. If you want to play games, brother, let's play. He pulled a small device from his pocket, a remote. I had this installed as a security measure. For unruly guests. He pressed a button. The sound started as a low hum, barely perceptible. Then it rose, a high-frequency shriek that felt like nails being driven into Vanessa's skull. The champagne flutes on the tables began to vibrate. The chandeliers swayed, and the guests started screaming. People dropped to their knees, hands clamped over their ears. Women in silk gowns collapsed against marble columns. Men in $1,000 suits bent double, retching. But it was Hyunwoo who fell hardest. He went down like he'd been shot, his body convulsing, blood immediately streaming from his nose. His hands clawed at his head, trying to block out the sound that was drilling into his hypersensitive nervous system like a bullet. Vanessa understood immediately. Sonic weapon, designed to overload the senses. For someone with Hyunwoo's condition, it was torture. On the platform, Jinsu stood untouched, noise-canceling earbuds visible in his ears. He looked down at his brother with cold satisfaction. I told you. You're too weak to lead. Vanessa dropped her tray. The sound of crystal shattering was lost in the chaos. She ripped off her mask and ran. She sprinted across the ballroom, dodging fallen bodies, overturned chairs, the debris of panic. Her vision tunneled. Her entire world narrowed to the sight of Hyunwoo on the floor, bleeding, dying. A guard tried to stop her. She drove her elbow into his throat and kept moving. The sound was getting worse, louder, a physical pressure that made her teeth ache. But it didn't stop her. Couldn't stop her. Because pain was just information. And she'd learned a long time ago how to ignore information that didn't matter. She reached Hyunwoo and dropped to her knees beside him. His eyes were rolled back, his body locked in a full seizure. He was choking on his own blood. Hey! She grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to focus. Look at me. Look at me. His eyes found hers. Recognition flared, then confusion, then terror. Not for himself, but for her. His lips moved, forming words she couldn't hear over the shrieking. Run. Not a chance. She pulled him against her chest, wrapping her entire body around his and clamping her hands firmly over his ears, using her own flesh to seal out the sound. And something impossible happened. The noise didn't stop. The frequency didn't change. But Hyunwoo's seizure began to ease. His breathing steadied, the blood flow slowed, like her body was absorbing the worst of it. Like she was a biological dampener, filtering out the pain before it could reach him. Hyunwoo stared up at her, his expression stunned. How? Later. She helped him sit up, keeping her arms around him. Can you stand? He nodded, and together they rose. The ballroom was carnage, bodies everywhere. Jinsu still standing on the platform, his face shifting from triumph to confusion as he watched his brother get to his feet. Alive, protected by a woman who was supposed to be dead. That's not possible, Jinsu said, his voice cutting through the noise. She's dead. I watched. You watched what I wanted you to watch. Hyunwoo's voice was steady now, strong. He kept one arm around Vanessa, holding her close. You always underestimated me, brother. And you definitely underestimated her. Jinsu's hand moved toward his jacket. Gun. Vanessa was faster. The small knife she'd tucked into her uniform was in her hand before Jinsu's fingers reached his holster. She hurled it with perfect precision, a skill learned in a Bronx where survival meant knowing how to fight dirty. The blade buried itself in Jinsu's shoulder. He stumbled back with a scream, and Hyunwoo moved. He crossed the platform in 3 strides, grabbed the remote from Jinsu's hand, and crushed it under his heel. The shrieking stopped instantly. The silence that followed was deafening. Hyunwoo stood over his brother, his chest heaving, blood still staining his face. When he spoke, his voice was dead, empty. You tried to break me once, in that white room. You failed then, and you've failed now. Jinsu clutched his bleeding shoulder, his eyes wild. The elders will never accept her. She's a liability. A weakness. No. Hyunwoo reached down and hauled Jinsu up by his collar, bringing them face to face. She's my anchor, my silence, my salvation. He shoved Jinsu away. And you're finished. Guards poured into the ballroom. Hyunwoo's guards, loyal ones, with Taemin leading them. They surrounded the platform, weapons drawn. Take him, Hyunwoo ordered. Lock him in the east wing. No one sees him without my permission. As they dragged Jinsu away, he was screaming. Threats, curses, promises of revenge. But his voice faded as the doors closed, leaving only the sound of groaning guests slowly regaining consciousness. Hyunwoo turned to Vanessa. For a moment they just stared at each other, breathing hard, alive. Then he pulled her into his arms. The embrace was crushing, desperate, his face buried in her neck, his entire body shaking. I thought I'd killed you, he whispered. Every night for 2 weeks, I thought I'd put a bullet in your head. I know. She held him just as tightly, her fingers tangling in his hair. But I'm here. I'm alive. And I'm not going anywhere. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. The sound. It should have incapacitated you. But you didn't even flinch. Vanessa hesitated. This was the moment. The secret she'd kept her entire life. I have SIPA, congenital insensitivity to pain with anhidrosis. I can't feel pain. Never could. Hyunwoo's eyes widened. That's why you don't hurt me. Your nervous system doesn't process physical pain, so you don't fear it. That silence, it breaks the feedback loop. It quiets everything else. I think so. Yes. She touched his face gently, her thumb brushing away the blood on his cheek. We're perfect opposites. You feel too much. I feel nothing. Together, we balance. Perfect opposites, he repeated, wonder bleeding into his voice. Then he kissed her. It was different from before. Not desperate or testing, but claiming. His hands moved through her hair, down her back, holding her like she was the most precious thing in existence. And Vanessa kissed him back with everything she had, pouring 2 weeks of fear and loneliness and love into the contact. When they finally broke apart, the ballroom was empty, except for Taemin, who was politely looking anywhere else. Sir, Taemin said carefully. The elders are requesting an emergency meeting. They want an explanation. Hyunwoo's jaw tightened. They'll get one. He looked down at Vanessa. Will you stand with me? Always. The emergency council meeting was held in the estate's formal conference room, a space of dark wood and darker intentions. 12 elders sat around a table that had witnessed generations of syndicate decisions, their faces carved from stone, their eyes calculating. Hyunwoo entered with Vanessa at his side. He'd changed into a fresh suit, black on black, but refused to clean the blood from his face. Let them see it. Let them see what Jinsu had done. Vanessa wore the green dress from their first dinner together. Hyunwoo had insisted. Let them know exactly who you are to me, he'd said. No more hiding. The elders stared as they took their seats at the head of the table. An older woman with silver hair spoke first, her voice cold. CO Hyunwoo, you have brought chaos to this house. Your brother claims you've lost your mind, that you've compromised the syndicate's security for a woman who poisoned you. My brother is a liar. Hyunwoo's voice was steady. He poisoned me. He framed her, and then he tried to murder half the syndicate leadership with a sonic weapon tonight because I refused to give him power. Murmurs around the table. The woman leaned forward. Do you have proof? I do. Taemin entered, carrying a laptop. He set it on the table and opened a file. Security footage filled the screen. Jinsu's mole planting the vial in Vanessa's apron. Audio recordings of Jinsu ordering the attack. Financial records showing payments to the syndicate's enemies. The room went silent as they watched. When the evidence finished, the woman sat back, her expression unreadable. And the woman? What is she to you? Everything. Hyun-woo reached over and took Vanessa's hand. Bare skin on bare skin, in full view of the council, several elders gasped. For 12 years, I couldn't touch another human being without agony. Then I met her. She is the only person on earth whose touch doesn't cause me pain. She saved my life during a seizure. She stood by me when I wrongly accused her. And tonight, she shielded me from a weapon designed to kill me. A weakness, another elder said. An exploitable vulnerability. No. Hyun-woo's grip on Vanessa's hand tightened. She is my strength. And I'm making this clear now. She is under my protection. Anyone who threatens her threatens me. And I don't take threats well. The temperature in the room dropped. This was the Shadow King they remembered. The man who'd built an empire on precision and ruthlessness. The silver-haired woman studied them both for a long moment. Then she nodded. The evidence against Jinsu is compelling. We will convene a formal tribunal. But Seo Hyun-woo, understand this. If she becomes a liability, the council will act. She won't. He stood, pulling Vanessa up with him. We're done here. They left the conference room hand in hand. Vanessa's heart still racing. Behind them, she could hear the elders erupting into heated discussion. But Hyun-woo didn't stop. Didn't look back. Just kept walking until they reached his private quarters. The moment the door closed, he backed her against it, his forehead resting against hers. I'm sorry. For doubting you. For locking you away. For every second of pain I caused. You were protecting yourself. I understand. It's not an excuse. His hands cupped her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones. But I swear to you, Vanessa Williams, I will spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me, that I will never doubt you again. Hyun-woo, I love you. The words were raw, stripped of all artifice. I loved you when I thought you were dead. I loved you every minute you were gone. And I will love you until the day I die. Tears spilled down Vanessa's cheeks. I love you too, even when you're an idiot. He laughed, that rare, beautiful sound, and kissed her. This time, there was no desperation. Just certainty, just the knowledge that they'd survived hell and come out the other side together. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with something that made her breath catch. Stay with me. Not as my employee, not as my shield, but as my partner, my equal, my wife. Vanessa's heart stopped. Are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to rule beside me. His voice was steady. Sure. The syndicate needs a queen. I need you. So yes, I'm asking. She should have been scared. Should have thought about the danger, the violence, the impossible world he lived in. But all she felt was certainty. Yes. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his hands moving through her hair, down her back. They stumbled toward the bed, shedding clothes between kisses, his jacket, her dress, the walls they'd built around their hearts. When they came together, it was different from before. Slower, more deliberate. He mapped every inch of her skin with his hands, his lips, learning her with the focus he brought to everything. And she did the same, tracing the scars on his chest, the tension in his shoulders, the places that made him shudder. You're so warm, he murmured against her throat. You're always so warm, and you're always so cold. She pulled him closer. We balance, perfect opposites. They moved together in the darkness, finding a rhythm that felt like coming home. And when they finally crested together, Hyun-woo held her gaze the entire time, his eyes saying everything words couldn't. Afterward, they lay tangled in black silk sheets, her head on his chest, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. What happens to Jinsu? Vanessa asked quietly. The tribunal will handle him, but he won't walk free. Hyun-woo's voice was cold. He tried to take everything from me. There are consequences for that. Will they exile him? If he's lucky. His arm tightened. But I don't care what happens to him as long as you're safe. Vanessa traced patterns on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her palm. I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me now. Good. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Because I'm never letting you go again. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, the weight of survival and love pressing them together. And for the first time in 12 years, So Hyun-woo slept without nightmares. The tribunal took 3 days. The evidence was damning. Jinsu was stripped of his title, his assets seized, and exiled to a remote compound in South Korea under constant surveillance. He'd spend the rest of his life in comfortable imprisonment, alive but powerless. Exile is worse than death for a man like Jinsu. Powerless, controlled, forgotten. It was a mercy he didn't deserve. 1 year later, the wedding was a spectacle. The estate was transformed again, but this time with white silk and flowers instead of black and gold. The guest list included syndicate leadership from across the globe, all coming to witness the impossible. The Shadow King taking a queen. Vanessa walked down the aisle in a dress that made her feel like a warrior princess. White lace over her shoulders, a flowing skirt, and a neckline that dipped low enough to show strength. Marcus wheeled beside her, giving her away with tears in his eyes. Her mother sat in the front row, healthy for the first time in years thanks to the medical care Hyun-woo had insisted on providing. At the altar, Hyun-woo waited in an all-black suit, his gloves conspicuously absent. When Vanessa reached him, he took her hands, bare skin on bare skin, and smiled. The ceremony was brief, traditional Korean elements mixed with Western vows, and when the officiant pronounced them married, Hyun-woo cupped her face and kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. The reception was held in the same ballroom where they'd survived Jinsu's attack. But tonight, there were no weapons, no threats, just music and laughter, and the sight of a man who'd lived 12 years without touch, dancing with his wife, their hands clasped, their bodies pressed close. Later, in the privacy of their quarters, Hyun-woo removed her dress slowly, reverently. "I still can't believe you're real," he murmured against her shoulder. "That you're mine. I'm real. I'm yours." She turned in his arms, her hands moving up his chest, unbuttoning his shirt. "And you're mine. Always." He kissed her neck, her collarbone, the swell of her breast. "Until the world ends and beyond." They made love with the kind of tenderness that comes from surviving hell together. And afterward, as Vanessa drifted toward sleep, she heard Hyun-woo whisper, "You gave me back my humanity, my silence, my ability to feel something other than pain." She turned to look at him, her fingers tracing his jaw. "You gave me a reason to stop hiding, a place where I matter, a man worth fighting for. Perfect opposites, perfect partners." He pulled her closer, his arm draped across her waist, and they fell asleep to the sound of each other's breathing. Outside, the estate gleamed under moonlight. Inside, the Shadow King and his queen slept in peace, their bodies intertwined, their futures stretched before them like an open road. They'd survived betrayal, poison, exile, and war. They'd found each other in the darkness and built something unbreakable from the ruins, and in the morning, they would wake and rule together. Untouchable, unstoppable, inseparable.